Going on with our subject, Yoga Explained, this evening. Yoga is a must in everyone's life, only we do not realize it, because yoga simply means union with the one eternal Father, that great beloved of which our Master has spoken, whom we all seek. We seek it in many other ways, but in reality the soul wants oneness with the infinite Father. And so yoga means union. And those of you who want union, that you may walk and talk with the infinite, should follow yoga. That's why yoga, that ancient science, is so important, because it gives us actual contact with the one eternal Spirit, the one eternal Father, if we follow our yoga with full surrender. Practicing yoga and seeing the manifestations of the infinite is not enough. But if you follow it by surrendering your heart to the one eternal Father, then you cannot fail. So yoga is a must for all sincere devotees of God. Last time we were discussing, as you will remember, the soul. I think we had discussed it one or two meetings. And the soul is that part within us which does not change. Our ego consciousness changes. This worldly consciousness changes. We are sure of that. Things of this worldly nature you can never rely on. You can never depend upon them. But if you turn your attention inward toward the presence of God and make friends with Him, that does not change. That consciousness of the soul or the presence of God within us does not change. And that's where we must go. Our Master said, do not expect any fulfillment in this world existence. This is not a place of happiness. Our home is with our one eternal Father. Follow the way of the Masters. They have found that out, and they do that. And so must we. Go and know that eternal part of ourselves, the presence of God within us as the soul. And so, what is the matter? We have waking consciousness, and then we have subconsciousness, and then we have the consciousness of deep sleep. But there's a break in the continuity. That's all. If through yoga and devotion to God we can stop that break in continuity, we will then be eternally one with God, no matter what our state of existence. And so that is what yoga will give you. It will give you the consciousness of the soul through all of these varying states of consciousness, waking consciousness, subconsciousness, and the consciousness of deep sleep. Throughout the Scriptures we hear references to, I was in the state of deep sleep, or I was, as a man, just waking from the state of deep sleep. That seems to be the difficult place to be conscious of, so to speak. There's a break in continuity of consciousness, yet every time you meditate deeply, you are in the state of deep sleep, consciously. You're not conscious of the body, you're not consciousness of your name or your relatives or where you are, but you are fully conscious. Now that's the consciousness of deep sleep. Self-realization yoga will help you to do that or to reach that state consciously. And that is the state of the soul. So don't say, oh, I'm not conscious of the state of deep sleep. You are when you meditate. The only thing is you have to not break the continuity between this waking consciousness, subconsciousness, and the consciousness where you hear the Om vibration, or see the light at the Christ center, or feel the love of the infinite Father overwhelming you. That's the state of deep sleep. So don't say that you don't have it. You have to make it possible, not that there be no break in the continuity. And if you just watch it a little bit, follow your yoga, you'll be able to know that without doubt. And realize that there is no change between your waking state of consciousness and that state of deep sleep, wherein you feel the peace and bliss of God That's the state of deep sleep. But we're so used to going into unconsciousness when we hit the pillow, so to speak, that we have to break that habit, that's all. So remember, every time you meditate, hear the cosmic sound of Om, see the light at the Christ center, or all-pervading light, and feel His love. That's the state of deep sleep. So don't say that you can't know that state of deep sleep. We all can if we'll try just a bit. And so, this loss of continuity of consciousness is the thing we must overcome. And yoga will help you overcome that. There's no question of it. Yoga will help you from losing your consciousness from this state of waking consciousness in which you look around and see all things, and then passing into the state of subconsciousness where you can consciously dream, finally into that dreamless state where nothing exists except the presence of God and His great ones, the great love and bliss of God's presence. Yoga will help you do that. That's why yoga is so important. Now, this brings us to the point this evening of discussing just a little bit about the soul and other states of consciousness. This waking state of consciousness in which we see the flowers and see each other and see things, that's the phenomenal state of consciousness, or that state of consciousness is made up of phenomena. Now, underneath the phenomenal state is the noumenal state, or the real state, so to speak. Behind those beautiful flowers, which seem so wonderful, is that which has produced the flowers and which sustains them. And that is the spiritual state, or the astral state, whatever you want to call it, which suits you best. It is the underlying, unchanging energy and consciousness which sustains the flowers. Now, that's in the flowers, it's in you, and it is in me. So we have these two states, the phenomenal state, in which the ego reigns supreme, and we have the noumenal state, in which the soul reigns. That state is permanent. That's eternal. That does not change. If you can reach the noumenal state in which the soul lives, so to speak, if you can make that state dynamic to your consciousness, then you are not existing in this make-believe state of outward consciousness, this cosmic dream state, but you're living in the underlying real state, the noumenal state. And so those two things must be remembered, the phenomena and the noumena. The phenomena of these flowers is as you see them. If you can so concentrate on those flowers and get above this vibration of outward consciousness, you can see the light and energy from which those flowers have come and which supports those flowers. And so behind us, behind our brain, so to speak, is the spiritual brain. You don't think that this brain or this head that aches sometimes so hard just came from nothing. Behind that is the spiritual part of the brain or the light of the brain, and in that light is God's omniscient consciousness directing all things. The physical brain, we understand, we can dissect it. But the underlying noumenal brain, the spiritual brain, we cannot dissect it, but we can see. Through the soul's intuition, we can see that thousand-petal lotus, or the spiritual brain, and we can see its various parts. We can see the underlying arteries of the brain, and we can see the little blood corpuscles, that is the spiritual side, with the positive charge of the nucleus passing by your line of vision, if you can visualize the spiritual brain. So that's the real part. This physical brain will pass away. And the underlying spiritual brain will outlast the physical body. Behind that, of course, is the causal brain, and behind that is the one eternal ocean of spirit. But we'll wait till we come to those before worrying about it. We have enough to worry about to supersede this physical body and this physical brain. But these things are known and can be known if you will practice your yoga and then follow that with surrender to God through the channel He has sent to you, our beloved Guru. God speaks to us, and the final step must be taken through the channel He sends. And that channel for us is the channel of our beloved Master. As He is one with the omniscience of God and is the voice of God, so He can give us that oneness with God, which He has, if it is God's will, and if we receive the grace of God. Now, the former or the phenomenal part of us changes. This body changes. Why should we be concerned about it? Why should we put our faith in things physical? They change, they pass away. But the underlying noumena will not change and does not pass away. The phenomenal part of us, or this world existence, is known through the senses, mind, and intellect, and reason. We can reason these things out. But the soul we cannot reason. We cannot come at all near the soul through the senses, mind, or intellect, or the greatest intellect, or the sharpest reason, because the soul is a higher vibration, a much finer vibration than these other things of world existence. The soul has to be known through its own power, its intuition, whereby it knows all things. Now, yoga, if you follow it, will help you to supersede this body and this world existence so that there is no impediment to prevent the soul's power from manifesting in you. It is all there. We have to increase our knowing, as our master has said. Yoga will help you do that. And so, remember things of phenomena of the senses, mind, and intellect. They pass away. Every day we see things change. People come and go. We shouldn't be trapped, but we should go to that part of ourselves which does not pass away, the soul or the noumenal part of ourselves. And that is known through intuition. And until you still, as our master said, until you still the waves of the mind, the intuition cannot flow, and you cannot know the soul. Still the waves of the mind, he said. And there it is easy to know that you and your Father are very near together, very close together. And in your deep meditations you will feel his nearness, and you'll feel his gentle love beckoning you to come home. These are facts. Those who meditate deeply will be able to find these things and know these things. But to do it through the mind and the intellect, it cannot be done. God is very subtle. Yet, as one great saint said, of God no man can think. Think of it. You have to even put your thoughts away. But through love, through affection and love, he is easily known and kept. We do not want to just know God, we want to keep him. We must know him through the soul's natural love. And those who do not have that natural love in the soul, they cannot know God. They cannot know God. The great Nanak said, even though I'm known throughout universe upon universe, and am thought well of, and considered well of, throughout universes times 10, and still I receive not the glance of thy grace, I am as nothing, worse than a worm. So God's grace is the greatest thing, and his love is all that we need. If we can but do away with the ego, put aside pride and desire, and in all humbleness and humility ask God to come, and he will come, because we are his children. Now I have a few references pertaining to the subject of the soul. First from Hindu philosophy, which is the basis of our teachings of Self-Realization Fellowship. The Vedas and the ancient teachings are very old, and the truth is the same. As Gandhi said, underlying all true religions, the Vedas, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, Mohammedanism, Christianity is the same underlying truth. So the truth is the same. And so that's why we take various scriptures to point out the similarity or the underlying truth of these things which we discuss. First, from Hindu philosophy. Tagore says, when we are conscious of our soul, we perceive the inner being that transcends our ego and has its deeper affinity with the all, that is, the all-pervading oneness of God. The ego is the soul, but it's attached to the body, as you know. But when we transcend that, or supersede it, then we know that which is one, not with the body and changeable things, but with the unchanging presence of God's eternal Spirit. Also another one from the Hindu philosophy, from the Upanishads. Here we read, to know our soul apart from the self, or ego, is the first step towards the realization of the supreme deliverance or salvation. Of God no man can think simply means we have to supersede the ego. God is not known by the ego. It is the ego consciousness that keeps us attached to this transient existence. The first step is to supersede the ego. Do away with pride. Do away with egotism. Our Master has said this, rescue our soul, or rescue our consciousness or soul from attachment to breath and body. Self-realization fellowship gives the method. One of its greatest methods is the highest technique of concentration. Master gave us the definite steps whereby we can do these things. Others may say, do it. But the greatest thing he has given us is the ways and the means to supersede the breath, still the breath, that we may supersede the ego or body consciousness. So the truth is the same, but each saint gives a little different way to accomplish union with God. Yoga means union. Now, going on a little bit from the Bible. Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. They shall inherit, we might interpret it, all things. Who are the meek? Those who have done away with the ego, who have no pride, and pride is of the ego. Whenever your pride is hurt, remember you're in ego consciousness. Someone said that to me one time. It's a very good thing. Whenever you feel hurt, you're in ego. But when you supersede it, you don't care what people do to you. As one saint said, you must become like dust on the street to know God. In other words, you must supersede the ego with its pride and such things. Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. This is the same as saying that when a man gets rid of the pride of self, the ego, then he comes into his true inheritance. Jesus saw Nathanael coming. He said, here comes Nathanael, who is without pride, or who is without ego. Very humble. He called it, who is without guile. And because he is without guile, he shall see angels ascending and descending from heaven. In other words, because he has superseded the ego consciousness, done away with pride, and been pure of heart, he shall see the spiritual forces, and he shall rise above this ordinary worldly existence. That is from St. John, the 1st chapter, the 47th and 51st verses. Now, from our Bible, one or two other references, which points out that yoga is necessary for Christianity as well as any true religion. From Proverbs. Proverbs, the 24th chapter. 24th chapter, the 7th and 14th verses. This has a very deep metaphysical significance. This first one, the 4th, the 7th. Wisdom is too high for a fool. That is, a fool dwells in outward consciousness, found in the lower parts of the body, and especially the 3 lower centers of the spine. A fool lives in that consciousness. Then it goes on to say, he openeth not his mouth in the gate. The gate where we receive the highest wisdom, or where we live by the presence of God coming into us as cosmic energy, and with that energy is God's omniscience and his all-knowing power and his intelligence, if you want to call that. The fool, he openeth not his mouth in the gate. That is, he lives in the lower part of the spinal region instead of coming up to this point, where we see the reflection of the medulla center at the east gate. Now, those who meditate, they live there much more than in the lower centers of the spine. And therefore, their wisdom is not that of a fool. It's a very significant verse, the 7th, 24th chapter of Proverbs. And in the 14th verse, we read as follows. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be unto thy soul. This knowledge we receive from outward consciousness of mind and intellect does not last. It is not dependable. We all know that. But that which comes from the soul never faileth us, because the soul is a ray of God and the Great Spirit. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be unto thy soul when thou hast found it. We might add through yoga. Then there shall be a reward, and thy expectation shall not be cut off. If you can once know the soul and feel the presence of God in that soul, and feel the real love of the infinite Father without blemish, when the heart is of pure gold, you'll never leave it. That's what it means here. When thou hast found it, then there shall be a reward. That in itself is reward enough. And thy expectation shall not be cut off. So God is important, isn't he? To know. And from the 26th chapter of Proverbs, one verse, the 12th verse. This is really quite a practical verse. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? We've seen many of them. There is more hope of a fool than of him. In other words, those who are conceited and are still in ego consciousness, how can they know God? It's impossible. Because God is a spirit and must be known through spirit, through the intuition of the soul. And so I think this verse is very appropriate. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? We've seen those people. Farthest from God of anyone. There is more hope of a fool than of him. So it is important that we do away with the ego. Get rid of it. It's our worst enemy. All desires have to be fulfilled under the leadership of ego. Now from the Bhagavad Gita. We have one reference at this time from the ninth discourse. Ninth discourse, the 11th line. This points out how people living in the world cannot understand that just behind this world existence is God. And it says just that in the Bhagavad Gita. The foolish disregard me when clad in human semblance, ignorant of my supreme nature, the Lord, the great Lord of all beings. And so in the hearts of every one of us is God. Master said God loves us so wonderfully and silently and through the hearts of his devotees. God is in every one of us, but very few his great love can flow through. Because we have to spiritualize and purify this instrument, then his love can flow through us.